Just for those, hey Phil, good to see you. Thank you. I'm so glad you made it because this is the most reasonable time we've done for New Zealand. Thank you. Welcome everyone. Just so you know that the recording is only it goes on the YouTube channel for those who miss because of the timing. Antonio is in Spain, myself in Singapore. So we vary the meeting timing, appreciating we have a global membership. Even today, we've got from Somalia to Manchester to New Zealand, Australia to Sydney. So it just allows for the adjustment in timing. Let me do a share screen next. All right, so here we go. Wow, April already.
With the strategy that we I would say perhaps we're moving at in the first part of the project. So I'll encourage everybody here.
Here we go. Just encourage anyone to put, whichever name you like me to address you by, and then if you can, just add your location. It's always good to see, especially for our guest presenters today, so they can see how we travel the world. Okay, and we've got a few more just coming in as I admit everyone. Antonio is teaching today in the Middle East for one of the universities and sends his apologies. So I'm acting as both admin and presenter today. So here we go. Welcome everyone, our April meeting. Very focused today on the topic of ambidextrous leadership, which from my perspective has picked up momentum and interest. As leaders today, we all know we're being asked to do more with less, and balancing your everyday present skills and also looking at innovation, making your organization future-proof is a challenge that Andrew and Jaya Grant are going to be discussing with us shortly, and I will introduce them in just a few minutes. But Andrew and Jaya, if you want to give a wave and say hi. Here we go. The first thing, I'll do an update for the Institute, which is just a couple of key things to share with the members. Then I'm going to introduce Andrew and Jaya. We'll hand over to them. They're going to share why it's so critical and the role for leaders to be ambidextrous. And then we're going to have a group discussion. Okay. Here we go. So first things first, Antonio and I have been updating the website, and we've introduced something new called the value pack. So I'll just show you the actual live page. So hopefully you should be looking at the live page. And what this is a free resource that we've added a little bit for the members, not so much for SIPs. But this is targeting people because we have about 300-400 visitors to the website every month with very little marketing. So we wanted to offer a free resource so people could understand the content of the course. So for our strategy implementation professionals, our SIPs, they will be familiar with these tools, but there's a free resource now that you can download. And you can see the titles here. Why is it critical to allocate resources? Why do organizations habitually repeat mistakes? What is your stakeholder analysis matrix? Leadership engagement as a discipline, aligning culture, for example, building employee accountability. So these I just want to share as something new that we've added. And then the second thing on the website, just as a quick update, is we've also added the corporate membership course and certification. So this is very much of our B2B focus for this year. And I'll just bring it over. Oh, sorry, it's the same one. And what this is for corporates who are looking, specifically those who have launched a new strategy or just about to, We've given a dedicated page for both individual and B2C and also B2B now. And you can see here, talking very much the benefits of the organization. So what's the value and the pricing? So very much looking at the value for B2B. And then the third, part of work that Antonio and I have been doing is when we were last together in the Drucker Forum in Vienna, we both had committed to upgrading the course, both in the content and the quality. So we've reshot all the videos in a higher resolution, and they've now all got subtitles, so people can take the course on their phone and don't need to see us speaking or hear us speaking, sorry. So we've been working on that, and the videos will be finished by the end of this month. So we've updated all of those. We've also added a couple of new things. So going forward for the SIPs, they're going to receive a congratulations video from both of us, and a couple other little things we've added that will come out in the next few weeks. And then just in case you think we're sitting on our hands doing nothing all day, it's getting very close. Version 2.0 of the strategy implementation playbook. It's going to what stage are we at? It's going for page layout within the next week. And by May, we're going to have the playbook updated with all the new course content. So the changes that we've made. So the May monthly meeting, which is, I think, May the 9th, and I'll share the date at the end, but I'm pretty sure May the 9th, because May the 1st is a public holiday in many countries, so we want to do the week after. So May the 9th, I will be sharing what the updates are, the new articles, the new content, and the focus of the playbook, and that will be May's focus. Let me pause there and see if there's any comments or questions before I go forward. Gone very quiet. It's not like our normal group. All right. So we just got a couple more coming in. Okay. So let me now, with pleasure, introduce two people I know very well who have been kind enough to give us their time today. And to talk about ambidextrous leadership, it's my good friends Andrew and Jaya Grant, and they are based out of Sydney. For those who know the area, Phil, they live in Manly, so you'll be familiar. And Andrew, Jaya, and I, we all met up over 25 years ago. Wow, when you start talking 25-year blocks, it gets scary. I was working for Citigroup and running an event in Bali, and they'd hired Andrew and Jaya to run an event after I'd been working with the Indonesian team, and that's how we got to know each other. And over the last 25 years, we supported each other because we offer complementary services. So what Andrew and Jaya very much focus on is the innovative leadership. And they are both a rare combination because you see, couples running businesses before, but to have them both as established global keynote speakers is an unusual, as well as published authors. Jaya completed her doctorate in innovation at Sydney University a few years ago, so we can address her as Dr. Grant. And sorry, just give me one moment, just admitting people. And very much has a passion around supporting in terms of understanding, well, what she's going to explain, the two different sides of leadership in terms of keeping the business running, as well as having that creative element. She was kind enough to send out the complimentary assessment. I don't know how many managed to complete it. I enjoyed doing it myself. And then Jaya did a one-on-one session with me to understand it. So she'll be covering some of that. Andrew also has a passion for not only keynoting, but presenting. And he and I presented around the world with different clients, as well as with Jaya. You can see in the picture at his TEDx. presented with Covey and many other people. And both of them published 2 books, Who Killed Creativity and How to Get It Back. And then more recently was The Innovation Race, that looked at different countries and different locations. And, you know, they'll talk a little bit, maybe if we ask them, they'll talk about different countries and how they rate them in terms of innovation. And they run a very creative and interactive workshops around innovation, have created a lot of licensing games that have been picked up in Europe, Asia, America, and across the world, where what they create to bring innovation to leaders has been licensed out to other companies who have adopted and used it. How's that? How did I do, Andrew and Jaya? Okay. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to hand over to yourselves. We've got a great turnout. You've got 18 people on the call. Andrew, Jaya, ambidextrous leadership, what is it all about?
Hi, Robin and everyone. Thank you so much. It's always interesting to hear the introduction and to think about what's brought you to this point and what you've done to get to where you are. But Andrew and I, as Robin said, are a husband and wife team. We have been working together. So you mentioned we've known each other over 25 years. I think we've been working together for over 30 years. And remained married for that time. So I think that's quite an achievement in itself. But we try to practice what we preach. And what we preach about is this concept called ambidextrous leadership, which we believe is a cutting edge approach to future leadership. Because in the future, we will have to innovate fast. We will have to come up with breakthrough new ideas. We will have to be big picture thinkers. We will need to be looking to future horizons. And at the same time, we will need to be maintaining systems and structures that support that innovation. We will need to be implementing effectively. We will need to be following through. So I think this is really an ideal topic for your strategy implementation group. So let's just unpack this a little bit. I've been studying this now for over 10 years. And so I've got some sort of in-depth research into the topic, but I'm going to start with something really light and easy. And I'd like you to have a think about, this is the unvalidated version. So you've done the questionnaire and we'll come to that later. But I'd like you to think about, how do you like to travel? What are the things that you appreciate the most when you travel? And in the chat window, I'd like you to choose an A or a B. Can you put an A if you are the type of person who likes to explore? So you really like to go to new places, new destinations, you like to try new foods, you'll eat off the street carts in a local area, you'll find your own way around, you'll stay in the local Airbnb or the Lostman or whatever it is. And you'll like the sense of adventure. You like not to plan, but to go with the flow. If you choose B, you will be the type of person who really likes to have a schedule, likes to have a long-term plan, likes to be guided when you go on a tour. You like to stay in branded hotels or something that's more comfortable and safe. You prefer to sit by the pool than go off and have an adventure that could be risky. So if money wasn't an issue, so don't take that into account, what would you choose, A or B? And let's have a look at what's coming through. So we get a sense for how many A's and how many B's. So far, yeah, a couple of A's, oh, fairly mixed. A few A's and B's coming through. So I'd like you now to think about, what do you think the A's and the B's represent? What would you say A is like in terms of your approach to leadership, your approach to the future, if that's just a simple representation? And what would you say B represents? Put something in the chat window, just have a think about that. So A would be fluid leadership. Yes, go with the flow. Don't plan too much. Don't be too strategic. Allow for the possibilities to emerge. A is happy to test and experiment. Absolutely. B is more calculated. Yes. A, exploring. B is more consistent. A is more spontaneous. Exploration for A, etc. Great. So horizon setting versus guided. B is more stable. You've picked up on some really key points there really fast. So think about the fact that neither of these is right or wrong. So neither is better than the other. They're simply different. And so we have this approach that I've called through my research exploration. And that is where you're prepared to take risks. You're looking for those breakthrough new ideas. You're a big picture thinker. You're fluid. And you're probably more strategic. Whereas B is the sort of person who's more interested in those systems, those structures, those logical approaches, probably more focused on the details and more likely to follow through and implement. So there's pros and cons, as I said, neither is right and wrong. And certainly as a traveler, if you explore too much, then you might not really, you're taking risks and you might put yourself in danger. You might not have any clear outcomes. And if you're too safe, then you're not necessarily experiencing what there is to be experienced, and you're not necessarily growing and learning through the experience. So in terms of innovation, I think this just helps to set the scene for two different approaches to innovation. Typically, we've thought about innovation as being this exploration or this focus on openness, exploring new ideas for rapid breakthrough growth. And yet, innovation must also have the flip side. We must also be thinking about how do we sustain that over the long term? How can we ensure that it's not just a great idea that's a fleeting moment, but that we can actually implement it and follow through? So that's where you get the focus on incrementally developing and maintaining current systems and structures. I have a metaphor that I often use to help illustrate this point. So if you think about what the Earth's looks like, the Earth's magnetic field is a magnetic field that protects the Earth from solar storms. So it performs a really important function. And yet at the center of the Earth, there is something called the Coriolis forces. And they're quite volatile. There's intense heat, there's intense chaos, but producing from that is this beautiful magnetic field. So you have those yellow lines coming out from the South Pole, going away from the Earth, and then in the North Pole, you have those blue lines coming back into the Earth. So you need that exploration, that those are the lines moving away from the Earth. And yet, if we focus too much on exploration, our ideas won't get grounded. So we must also have that preservation, that is bringing ideas back to Earth, grounding them. And together, they work as a paradox pair. A paradox means that you have two concepts that are complementary and yet contradictory. So they're independent yet interdependent. And we often think of these concepts as being either or, but we've got to stop using that language. We need to start thinking in terms of both and. We need both exploration and preservation to be able to successfully innovate, to implement our strategies in the future effectively. We need that balance of both. So mathematicians are able to balance both effectively, so they can tap into both sides of their brains, as can, and it's a rapid switching between the neural pathways, as can jazz dancers, as can, jazz musicians, as can dancers. So we need to be able to tap into both perspectives, both orientations, and that's where you're getting this ambidexterity or ambidextrous leadership. I'm going to unpack that a little bit so you can understand your graphs and how the profile measure works. What I did was I looked at research from over the last 60 years, and there was a particularly interesting piece of research from about 60 years ago from someone called Ariely, and he identified what are the key core factors in exploration. He did that by looking at creativogenic cultures, or cultures that produce an unusual number of geniuses. So I thought this was really clever. He discovered that there were certain political, cultural, economic, social cycles that all converged, and particularly in the Renaissance period. You had this period in time where there was an unusual number of geniuses who emerged. So you'll see there Leonardo da Vinci. You think of, there's so many people during the Renaissance period that not only were artistic, big picture thinkers, not only fluid, creative thinkers, and they were also scientific. So they were also able to ground their ideas, able to imagine them in detail, and able to implement them into designs and into inventions that were really highly effective. And they focused on the details of that. So you can see that there's this ambidextrous thinking way back in time. So Ariely came up with 9 concepts, and by looking at the literature since the 60 years ago, in the last 60 years, I came up with 4 basic concepts that I believe make up exploration. And I decided these factors were important because it helps you to understand the specific behaviours that can lead to exploration. So it's very practical focus. So the first one I discovered was that exploration involves freedom. You must have a foundation of freedom. So you think about that in terms of countries and cultures where there is freedom. Democracies actually produce the most amount of patents. So where there is freedom to think, freedom to experiment, freedom to explore, then we do get a greater amount of innovation. And you think of that on the other side, where you get a country like North Korea versus South Korea. It's like a tale of twin cities or twin countries, where you have a lack of freedom in North Korea, no innovation, and a high level of freedom in South Korea. And they are one of the highest patent producers in the world. They're very high on the innovation rankings. So that's just an example. Next, we have openness. So during the Renaissance period in Europe, there was an openness of borders. People traveled, they shared ideas. They were able to cross boundaries effectively. So something like the printing press came together in Germany with Gutenberg, but actually the elements of the printing press came from all over the world, from Egypt, from China, from exotic, distant locations. They came together because there was that openness, and there was that trade, open trade at that time. And yet openness is not enough. There's a next level, and that level is collaboration. So not only do you need to have people in close proximity to each other and connecting with each other, there also needs to be a deeper level of collaboration. And you'll find that a lot of innovations today are not just an idea that one person has come up with. They're building on other people's ideas, and they eventually come up with something that's commercially viable and something that works really well. Finally, we have flexibility. So the last factor that is really critical for exploration is the ability to be able to adapt and to be flexible. So you think about inventions. Innovation requires a lot of testing, a lot of prototyping, a lot of reworking until you can come up with something that is practical and implementable. So we need all of those things when we're thinking strategically. We need that openness, we need that freedom, we need that collaboration, we need that flexibility. And yet, if you just focus on those things, you won't be implementing effectively. So too much freedom is a problem, because you're not going to be grounded. So we also need some stability, some control. And control, I'm listing as one of the 4 paradox pairs on the preservation side. But think about too much control is also dangerous, because that can become oppressive. So you've got this wonderful tension between the need for freedom and the need for control. We don't want one or the other, we have to have both. And so that creates a tension that, if it's not managed effectively, can be highly destructive. If it is managed effectively, then it can accelerate innovation and growth and can be very, very powerful for strategic implementation. Too much openness can lead to no clear direction. So we do need some focus. Focus is really important, and yet too much focus can be a problem, because that means that we can become disconnected and disengaged. Too much collaboration is actually a problem too, because you can get groupthink. So we do need some independent thinking. Too much independent thinking, and then you're not open to the ideas of others and not able to build on the ideas of others. Too much flexibility can be a problem because you can end up having no clear direction. So we do need some stability. Too much stability can become rigidity. We've got that beautiful balance again that's needed. It can be like that, the magnetic fields around the Earth at the core. It can generate a lot of heat. It can be highly destructive unless it's managed effectively, unless it's facilitated well. So these can be tensions within ourselves, and they can be tensions within a team, within an organization, within a country, within a culture. We need to understand this tension, recognize it so that we can maximize the potential rather than letting it become that destructive force. I'll share with you a little bit of research data before we get onto your profiles. So there is a white paper if you're interested in going back into the details of the research, what it means to become an innovation, ambidextrous innovation leader. And it's based on 66 innovation leader surveys. So I interviewed global innovation leaders and asked, what was important to them. It's 2-year-long case studies. I developed the measures. Then I tested the survey responses and looked for statistically significant results. And then I followed up by giving the survey to innovation leaders and finding out, was there a typical innovation leader profile? So that's sort of a broad background.
For those who are interested, where's the white paper hosted?
You can go to Tyrian.com and you'll find it under resources if you want to have a look at the white paper. Okay. So yes, I'm giving you
the name of your company on the bottom for those who.
Yeah. Can you put it in the chat window?
Doing it now.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew.
So yes, I am really racing through some big concepts today and trying to simplify them and trying to make them accessible. So I do recommend doing some follow-up reading if you really want to sort of make the most of what we're talking about. The ethnographic case studies were fascinating because I was like a fly on the wall in organizations over a number of years, and I was able to observe these factors at play. So I was able to see where, for example, a general manager came in who was a big picture strategic thinker, who had lots of great ideas and was expecting the employees to follow through and to implement. And yet the employees were often confused. The leader was moving too fast. They felt that they didn't really have that vision. They weren't understanding how to implement. And there was this incredible tension between the two. So after capturing a lot of the information, which was fascinating, and making these observations, I mapped the dynamics within the senior leadership teams and within other teams within the organization. I provided feedback, and I was able to have the opportunity to really change organization culture. And there were reported changes within teams of up to 15% and within the organization culture of up to 20%. So it is possible to see change when you can help people to understand these dynamics and know how to manage them. So let's look at the profile measure itself. If you had the chance to complete the questionnaire, can you pull up your graph? You should have been sent a graph. And if you haven't done it, I recommend you do, because we're providing it complimentary as part of this session. So it's a great chance to get some feedback and to understand this approach. So what you'll see is the basic concept, exploration and preservation. So we're looking at, do you have more of an orientation as an observer or more of an orientation as a preserver, like when we talked about the travel preferences? I find that this is really easy for people to remember and apply. So when you go back to your meetings, back to your organization, when you're thinking for yourself, it's easy to think, am I in exploration mode? Do I need to be in exploration mode? Should I be brainstorming right now? Should we be brainstorming and not be judging and not be critical? And when do we need to move into preservation mode? When do we need to start realizing we have a deadline? We've got to ground this. We've got to follow through. It's time to implement. How do we do that effectively? So the two concepts are the umbrella concepts, and then within that are those 4 paradox pairs. And this should help to explain your behaviors a little bit further by going into that extra depth. So that's how you'll see your graph is constructed around those 4 paradox pairs. And we're looking at what are your specific preferences. When you have a look at your chart, we're looking at the orange bars. So stretching to the left of the center line is if you have a long orange bar, then you have more of an exploration orientation in one of those factors. If you have a long stretch to the right of one of those orange bars, then that means you have a strong preservation orientation in that particular factor. So we're looking at, first of all, the balance. I'm going to look at the bottom one there. The balance is, are you reasonably ambidextrous? Are you able to stretch in both directions? It's impossible to be perfectly balanced in everything. It's just not easy to do, and it's not recommended. It can be very stressful. You just need to understand if you are able to stretch adequately in both directions. We're also looking for the length of those bars. So if you have fairly long bars, then you're pretty effective and you're pretty clear that that's a strength for you. If the bar is too long, then there is the potential for burnout because you may be pushing yourself too hard in that one particular area. If the bars are too short and too close to the center line, then perhaps you're not comfortable in a particular situation and you're not feeling you can stretch yourself or experiment with that particular behavior. So something worth reflecting on. So with the lines that are too long, there is the potential for burnout. With the lines that are too short, there is the potential of lacking effectiveness in that area. One other thing you can look out for is the 2 center bars indicate more of a people focus. So if you're long on those to the left, then you'll have more of a people focus for the exploration orientation. And then if your bars are long to the right for those 2 centered lines, then you'll have more of a task focus. So just something to consider as you look through the graph. So here's a sample graph. You can see that this person has quite a strong challenger emphasis and less of a conserver emphasis. So they're more of a challenger, and that means they've got a blue dot to the left to show that is their overall emphasis. Whereas for the second bar, they're more of a targeter, they have more focus and less of an openness orientation. So a blue dot represents them more of a targeter. The third one, they're pretty ambidextrous. They're quite balanced. So they have a blue dot on both sides. And the last one, again, they have a stronger exploration orientation. So they're more of an adapter than a stabilizer. So if you look at the overall pattern, they have more blue dots on the left, so they have more of an exploration orientation, but they're pretty ambidextrous. So 3 dots on the left, 2 dots on the right, pretty balanced overall. Looking at the 2 middle bars, you can see that they have a stronger task focus. So they really focus on the task. They operate independently, and yet they're still pretty collaborative and they are able to get on with the team. There's a bit of a gap there is in openness. So perhaps that could be an area that they could develop and think about. Do they need to network more? Do they need to read more? Do they need to explore more ideas? They're the sorts of things that this person could consider. When we looked at statistically significant outcomes, we found that executive leaders had a very strong exploration orientation. So these are your strategic, big picture thinkers. These are the guys who shouldn't be down in the weeds getting the details of the job done. They should be able to delegate to their team, to their organization, but they have that ability to see to future horizons. They're pretty independent as well, and they're able to keep the organization stable. So you don't want them running off and doing things individually. The HR profile came out with a similar profile, so strong exploration orientation, reasonably strategic, and they also had a strong conserver orientation, so a strong focus on control. And that makes sense when you think about HR, who sort of like their systems and the structures, and I guess that helps them to follow through and helps them to implement what they need to do effectively. So they are pretty hands-on people, not just strategic big thinkers. Our scientists and technologists came out as the most ambidextrous. And that makes sense because they need to be big picture thinkers who are able to think outside the box. They need to be creative thinkers. And they also need to be able to experiment, to test, and to be really rigorous in their approach, to follow through in detail, to follow through effectively. So really quite balanced there. So no guesses for which profile. I'll have a think about it. You can put it in the chat window if you want to have a quick guess at which profile or which type of role in an organization might have a strong preservation orientation. Any guesses? I'll give you just a couple of seconds to see if you can work that out. Who might have the strongest preservation orientation in an organization typically?
Can they get a free copy of your book if they get it right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you pay for the shipping. Oh, Robert,
We
yes.
can do ebook. Electronic.
Electronic book, okay. So yes, absolutely, it's finance, auditing. I would say operations and production as well. I just didn't have enough of those to measure. So very strong preservation orientation. And yet I found most people in the organization have a fairly strong collaboration orientation, because I think we all know that you have to be collaborative to succeed in an organization today. So I think that was sort of a different outcome. Now, here's an interesting one. This was the innovation leader profile. And I'd say your innovator is probably the closest to the strategic implementer, because you have to have that strategic big picture approach. So you've got all four factors on the side of exploration. And you also have a very strong independence focus. So that ability to drive things, to follow through, to make things get done. That's the implementer or the implementation leader, because they're not necessarily focused on the finer details. They haven't got too much of a focus or too much of a control or too much of a need for stability. So what can be really interesting is when you look at these profiles side by side, because then you can start to see the dynamics in teams and how you can really maximize the opportunities to leverage these different orientations. So you can see we have a sales profile on the left here, where it's a very strong exploration orientation, or to the left. And then you have the finance profile on the right, very strong preservation orientation. So when you look at them side by side, potentially there's going to be a lot of stress and a lot of conflict between the two. And we've seen that for example, in hotels, where the salesperson is out comping room nights and giving gifts, and the finance person is going, no, we don't have the budget for that. That's not permitted. So if there is no respect and understanding and awareness, you will get that tension. Where there is a respect and understanding and awareness, then you can leverage those opportunities. So Shona says, same between sales and production. Absolutely. Same within, there's quite a few different roles in organizations where you're going to notice that tension. And I've just got an example of how I've mapped a conversation between a CEO and GM in one of the case study organizations that I worked with. And I can see that, I could see that the CEO was pulling in one direction. So the yellow is exploration orientation, the language related to that. So he's saying, he's actually talking about how he doesn't like the detail, he doesn't like the processes, he doesn't like the metrics. He's the entrepreneurial founder of this organization. He's the strategic big picture thinker, and he thinks they're getting bogged down. And yet his organization is falling apart. A number of the directors have left, a number of the employees have left. It's been in the media that this is a toxic work culture. So this GM has been brought in by the board to provide a balance. And so the GM comes into the conversation. I call him COO here. And he says, but how do we start to get back into control and dictate the terms? So he's talking with a preservation orientation, pulling back over to the preservation side. The CEO sort of sticks to what he wants to focus on. He's saying, we need a culture, we need trust, we need to have important conversations. And at this point, this is when the COO, who is pretty ambidextrous, is able to recognize that he's got to bring the language in to provide that balance. So he talks about, yes, we've actually got to be clear and consistent. We've got to govern, we've got to have resources. There's a preservation orientation, and we need to have this global, big picture, strategic view and be kind to each other. So you can see that dynamic in practice and how you can work a conversation to make sure you're covering both. So I've got to freeze up. There we go. I'm going to, at this point, hand over to Andrew. And I'm sorry, Andrew, I've used most of your time. I think you've got about 5 minutes left to talk about what that looks like in practice in contemporary organisations today.
Oh, yeah.
No, we're not going to do that. Yeah.
Oh, well, I'll do the share profiles. You can go on mute. Let me share the profiles. Robin, can you allow me to share the screen?
Yeah.
Or will I just put it in the
Your co-host.
Okay, otherwise I share screen.
Andrew, we'll take a moment. Chair, do you want to take some questions in between, or do you want to wait till after Andrew presents? Andrew's ready to. We're looking
I'm
for
good.
email.
You ready to go?
Yeah, can you see?
We can see your 3,908 archived emails.
Oh, that's not good.
So maybe, Andrew, while you're setting that up, Jay, you could take one or two questions if people are. Andrew, you might want to stop sharing. There we go.
Yeah, I'm sharing the right
Any
screen.
questions for Jay just while Andrew's prepping to share?
Got it. Done. Too late. Too slow. Look, basically what we can do is you can run this as a individual and look at each individual. And I've got all of you on screen as individuals. If I want to see each one, so we can have a look at Robin's. Well, anyway, that's each of you individually, but we can also actually map it as a team one. So you can see here that we've mapped you as a team. Joe, I don't know whether you want to, I don't think we'll go through what that means, but it's a really valuable tool that you guys can use, both doing one-on-one coaching if you need to for implementation, but also if you're looking at implementing things, then you need to look at where's the team. Is it an exploring team that wants to jump in and become great implementers, or it is a preserving team that's much more conservative and says, oh, we don't want to implement this, we've done it before, it didn't work. And so I think it's a really valuable tool to use for individuals, but also to understand where teams' biases are from. So we'll send you that graph result, and you've also got your own graphs. Jaya, next screen. So if you think about creative leaders, perhaps the one I want to mainly talk about is the example of Steve Jobs, who was an explorer, and Tim Cook, who was a preserver. And you'll realize that Apple were at their absolute best when they had the combination of Steve Jobs and Tim Cook. Steve Jobs on his own would have gone right off the left-hand side of the road exploring. He got kicked out of his company several times. Tim Cook on his own, well, we're still in that current season of the innovation race because we don't know how he'll go. He's doing well. He's a great preserver. He's very good at tightening, buying, procurement, but the inventions are not coming as fast as Steve Jobs. And I think it's really important to understand that leading innovation is very different to being an innovator. So today's session is about leading innovation. How do you lead a team of people where some of them want to race ahead at full speed using AI, which is exponentially now creating change within a company, and those that are racing ahead linearly, much slower, saying, well, we want business transformation. The gap's just getting bigger and bigger between the two. So this is not about being an innovator, it's about leading innovation. You don't have to be an innovator to lead innovation. You need to understand how to lead the team, keep the explorers and the preservers on the track, and use the tension between the two to help them become better. So I think if we just jump right ahead now, Jay, for the next lot of slides, we won't go into the Steve Jobs, Tim Cook, just run those through slides very, very quickly. You can see here the innovations between Jobs and Cook, almost, virtually nothing. But what we're seeing is that survival actually depends on both simultaneously working together. That's when they work at their best. And as Jay has kept pointing out, the CEO and the CEO in the company she worked with did best when they learned to work together. And that's what we're doing. We're trying to balance the tension of the teams and getting them to learn together. And so what we're seeing is that leaders must either recognize for a dual focus. We need to have a leaner startup style in a team, but we also need the established person. And there's no better example of that than Google and Alphabet, where Google realized, well, on their own, they're too slow, so they can break away Alphabet and do something quick. So I think that brings us pretty much to the end. That's my favorite example of the model, in the sense that you've got going down the side of the road, you can go down the left-hand side, you can go down the right-hand side, but like any good racing car driver, if you go slightly off the track, you're gone. So too much freedom, as Jaya said, leads to chaos. Too much control leads to oppression. Our job as leaders or as implementation leaders or coaches is to keep that team on the road. Going down the middle of the road won't work. Going purely down the left-hand side of the road won't win the race. Going purely down the right-hand side of the road won't win the race. Your job as a leader or a coach or someone that's implementing is to manage that team so the implementation moves forward, keeping the explorers and the preservers working in tension with each other. So I think that brings us now to, no, next slide. Well, that's yes, just a kid graphic, isn't it? We do have a lot of resources available. I think Robin will send the list to you, but you can become an accredited coach to learn to administrate this ICLI test. You can run mini collaborative workshops. We've got a full licensing module, but that's probably a little bit big for independent people. There's online courses that people can do. And there's a gamified version where we go around the world looking at what allows for innovation or not. Perhaps probably the most relevant thing for you guys is if you're interested in is to look at the coaching course. So you can become an accredited coach and then be able to deliver a coaching course with all the worksheets that needed and the skill set to take an individual or a team through this particular model so they can actually get to successful implementation as opposed to just charging all over the place. I'll leave you with one last example, and that's if this can happen to a company the size of Meta or Facebook, it can happen to anyone else. In 2022, Mark Zuckerberg decided to invent the metaverse. He burnt $13 billion going off the left-hand side of the road, exploring to the point where no one would bring him back in. In 2023, he realized he'd burnt $13 billion and quickly skidded back across to the right-hand side of the road, calling it the year of efficiency and firing almost a third of his workforce, replacing it with AI. What we need is a little bit more strategy when it comes to implementing. And if Meta can make the mistake, so can everyone else. We need to help people navigate along this road so they're not burning $13 billion, skidding off the left side, firing 25% of the workforce in their year of efficiencies because they blew the 13 billion, skidding off the right side, and help teams implement successfully going down the road using the tension of the explorers and the preservers. How'd I go for 5 minutes?
You've done great. Do me a favor, Andrew. Can you go back a couple of slides to your airplane example? Because that kind of captures.
Yep.
And I'm going to open up.
Yeah, probably that's a great slide, the road.
Yeah, the one.
So we can turn that, not that one, next one back. We can turn that into a racetrack. So there's a collaboration canvas racetrack where you can plot your strategy. I won't go into it now, but there is a, I've sent you a link. There is a, we turn that straight line into a racetrack where you can help a team plot their strategy. When do they need to take a left-hand turn and go on the left-hand side of the road and be explorers? And then when does the team need to come across the right-hand road? So they get their strategy and they put their strategy on the racetrack saying, well, at this part of the strategy, we'll give permission to be explorers. But when we get to this side of the strategy, we need to give permission for the preservers to come in. And so that's the racetrack, which it's called the Innovation Highway. But that's all available. You'll see it all on the website if we've tickled your fancy. So with that model up and running, any questions for either or both of us?
Well, first of all, let me say thank you on behalf of SII for taking the time to share. We're going to open up. We won't go into groups. We've got one of the things we do, Andrew J, is we start and finish on time. So we have exactly 11 minutes. So we have 10 minutes. We're going to open up for Q&A in just a moment. Just to share with you the metaphor that Andrew and Jay first shared with me when they first developed the model that always helped me understand it was, Andrew, remember you used the example of the F1 where the car needs to go to the left and the right, and it's the tightness and efficiency of which it does both and the flexibility that helps the innovation. But my first question to you to kick off the questions is implementation by default is doing things differently. Because if you're doing things the same, then you're not changing, you're not implementing. And if you've got somebody who's strong on preservation and you're trying to argue with them, we've got to change, we got to innovate, we got to look at new ways of doing things, introduce new, and they're saying, no, I like it the way it all is. How do we get them? How can we convince them to be that balance between the left and the right-hand side of the runway?
Well, can I just share my screen again? I'll just show you one last thing, Jay, if I could just share that screen. I'll just show you one last way that this would work.
And while you're doing that, Jay, I loved your animation on your slides. They look great.
So there's an example of turning that road, that highway, into what we call a racing line, a strategic planning canvas. And this is a really practical tool where you can take those nested dimensions or take the Explore Preserve. This is available as a Miro board. Get your strategy that you've done with Robin or you've done yourself if you're all strategy experts, and plot that strategy on a racetrack so we know when to give permission for different people to do different things. So in a sense, Robin, that answers your question. When do we use different people to do different things? And when do we say to the explorers, you know what, we've done the exploring, now it's time to pull back over to the right-hand side because we're taking a right-hand turn. You'll never win an F1 race by staying on the left-hand side of the road or the right-hand side of the road. It's called the racing line. There are times as you take a corner that you go across to the left, pull into the right, come back out to the left again. So if we want to win that race using a strategy, implementation strategy, we need to get the strategy onto a racetrack and then get the team to balance that and work with that. So that's just one example of what we call a Miro board or a collaborator canvas that you can download and start using.
Thank you.
Now, did that answer the question or not?
It did, and I don't want to burn the time, so let me open it up. Questions, please. We've got 8 more minutes.
I have a question. If you, what are your, what is your experience and what are the best practices for the leader from one side of the spectrum leading a group of people from the other side of the spectrum? So let's say a type of a finance guy leading creative people and creative leader leading a team of auditors. Let's say. So what is your experience with that, and what are the best practices to balance out?
Well, the best practice is if they don't acknowledge it and are not aware of it, then that tension will rip them apart. So what we're saying is they have to acknowledge, I'm an explorer, this is my strengths, these are my weaknesses. So I'm a preserver, I'm in finance, you're an explorer, you're in sales. It's got to start with a recognition of understanding who's who. You can't get, otherwise the tension just rips people apart. So the tension will be there, and you actually want the tension to be there. It's the tension that brings you into innovation. But if we don't acknowledge who's who and who's in what position, then it'll just freewheel and rip people apart.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question as well, actually. Thanks for, kind of the presentation was highly interesting. But one thing I thought of is, I mean, I've been working most of my time in sales organizations, and typically, obviously, in sales organizations, there's a lot of more explorative types rather than the preservation, but still so because the pressures of the day-to-day business. Running the business, bringing in the numbers every quarter. Even if you have explorative leaders and teams, etc., they will always gravitate, I think, at the end towards preservation and stability because, again, they are under pressure to provide the numbers. So I think that the question that came to mind is when you have that situation, and you have actually the from a people perspective, the capabilities to probably find the right balance, but again, the pressures of the business carried into the other way. What can you do from an organizational, from a structural perspective to make sure that that balance always plays out? I mean, do you need specific forums? Do you need specific roles? And actually, one other thought I had is obviously demographically, a lot of companies, organizations gravitate, the populations become older, and older people, I think, are typically less explorative, but, tend to be more expressive. So there's also another element, kind of as employees and workforces become more aged, kind of the drive them to be more preservative. So my key question is, do you have any recommendations what organizations can do structurally to make sure that they keep the right balance?
I can, and I can base it on research, but I just wanted to start with your second point first quickly, because I've noticed that as a traveler, I used to be more of a risk taker. I used to love backpacking and exploring, and I am sort of preferring comfort as I age. So I think we're a bit like that in life. We sort of are less prepared to take risks. Not all of us, but as we age. So I think that's just something to relate.
And that's great. It's been 40 years I've been waiting for Jay to say that, and she said it on camera in front of 30 people.
And recorded.
We're definitely very different in our orientations, and we definitely have to work hard to balance each other out. But as an organisation, the research shows that there are two main approaches you can take. One is called structural ambidexterity, which is where you actually have different parts of the organisation focusing on different functions. So you're saying, all right, we'll have an innovation team who will be the explorers. We'll have a sales team who will focus on new ideas and exploration. And then we'll have the, production or finance or whatever who are going to focus on the preservation functions. So that's structural ambidexterity. But the better approach is contextual ambidexterity, which means that everybody understands ambidexterity and everybody is able to stretch in both directions, able to think ambidextrously. So it becomes a part of the culture, and it becomes part of the way people think and talk and act, behave, and that's much more powerful over the long term. So everybody can become an innovator, and everybody recognizes they have to know how to follow through and implement.
Okay.
Thank you. We have, thank you. Robert, I just sent you a quick message. I need your email. Can you put it in the direct message? Because I'm going to hold Andrew and Jaya to get you a copy of the book. Thank you.
Yes.
We have about 3 minutes left, so I'm going to do a rapid fire. Chris, can you do a quick, short message, your question? And then there's a couple of questions the people have posted that I'm going to host, and we'll do it as a rapid fire because we finish on time. Chris, thank you as always. You're always very contributing. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe I touched on this, but how do you deal with it, and how do you change people from one leaning to another, and how do you make sure that you recognize that as you're moving forward? Because if people change their position, it is going to change how you're structuring things.
And yes, you're right. This is not a personality measure. We're not saying that your orientations are set. You can adapt. You can shift over time. You can adapt in different contexts. And that's why providing a graph is really helpful. It's a form of feedback. So it's a mirror to what you believe your behaviors are. And therefore, you can change yourself. You can change the way you behave in different contexts. So that's the best way to help someone to change themselves. So they have this mirror, they can see who they are. You can do a 360 and they can get feedback from their peers, from their superiors, etc., and gain more insights into their behavior as well.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. I'm going to do a rapid fire. We've got about 60 seconds, Andrew and Jaya. Following up and connected with Chris's comment is very insightful session. Thank you as a leader. How do I ensure the tension does not degenerate into conflicts, which is my experience can be demotivating?
I'll do it. So I think you just keep that awareness, keep the language up. So start with a session where you'll reflect on your own orientations and then keep reminding each other, oh, this is my natural orientation. This is how we can work together in this particular situation. So just keep that awareness going.
So keep the awareness. Okay, next one. Thank you, Stuart. Great session. Perhaps as a follow-up, how do you find leaders of different types approach the need and the time to align to the strategic inflection point, which is when you need to launch a new strategy? Putting you on the spot, Andrew and Jaya. You got 5.
That's all right. So we're just negotiating who answers. So I would say use the strategic planning canvas, because that's reminding you of where do we need to move at which time as an organization, as individuals, as a team. What's coming up on the horizon? What do we need to consider? What's our best move at this point? How are we going to plan for the next stage? How are we going to adapt? So if you actually can map out those inflection points, then it will help you to be able to follow through more effectively.
Excellent, thank you. Literally couple of seconds left. Anything to close, Andrew and Jaya? Any closing thoughts? We've got 30 seconds left.
Well, we just hope now that you've seen it, you can use it. As I said, it's been designed. Jaya's done a whole PhD and years worth of research on it, and we're really excited that people are able to use it. I think it's perfect for strategy implementation, because you're not going to implement a strategy if you're not going to get the team around it, and you'll be talking, talking talking over people's heads. If you want to do this and they're going, well, hang on, I'm afraid because I'm preserving, or you're going too slow for me, I want to explore more. This gives you a chance to map those tensions and then get that strategy into the team so the team can work with it. That's the way I'd say it. So I'm looking forward to using it from a strategy, from a implementation perspective.
Thank you to both of you for also taking the extra effort to link it to what our key theme is around implementation. Can we give a virtual thank you to Andrew and Jaya for giving us their time and their commitment and their great graphics that brought it all alive. There's a lot of comments in the chat box. If you haven't seen it, awesome session, very insightful, very informative, great session. So thank you very much, everyone. 20 seconds closing out. Next session is on the 7th of May, where we'll be covering the changes to the SIP and the new information that will all be available to members. So I'll be covering that. It will be the 7th of May, 2 hours later from today's start time, whatever time in your place. Andrew and Jaya, can we follow up Shauna and Robert, who answered the question correctly? Do they get an e-copy of the book?
That's not with us. That's with Wiley, and I don't know who offered it out of you or Jaya, but you're going to talk to Wiley.
All right. If I can, I'll do my best. All right.
But there's a lot of other resources on the website that you can have a look at.
Maybe something else we can send as a thanks.
We can work something else out for you. But there's a
Right.
lot of resources on the website. Tell us what you like, and we'll see what we can do.
Thank you, guys. To everyone, lovely to see you all. Have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, and see you in 4 weeks.
Bye.
Thanks so much. Great to connect.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.